Hey guys, my name's Jay, welcome to my channel. This is where I share my art projects with you, and I was thrilled recently when my daughter said she wanted to have a Star Wars Mandalorian party for her birthday. And so I've gone out and ordered a 3D printed Armorer's helmet from The Mandalorian Season 1. As you can see, I've already prepped and primed it, so a couple of things I've got left to do. After I've painted it gold, we're going to sit down and we're going to work on the details, such as the weathering, a couple of extra little colours in there. And also, I'm going to put the tinted visor also behind the face piece there, just to finish it off. So, very, very happy to do this project, and I hope that you stick around. Okay, so I've base coated this in gold, just using a rattle can from our local hardware store. We've got Bunnings here in Australia. And I've also just coated the inside of the helmet using a flat black, also just using a rattle can. It doesn't really matter too much what brand, you just got to be careful which brands you mix together, some kind of react. So the other thing I'm going to be doing is painting the horns on top, just using a silver, probably just using some modelling paint, and then we'll add some grit and grime to all the creases and all the little gaps there in the helmet, sort of dirty it up a bit like a blacksmith's or an armourer's helmet would typically have. So I'm just going to use some silver modelling paint. I've got Game Colour here. I also use the Vallejo brand. And for the weathering, believe it or not, the Kiwi brand shoe polish. It works an absolute treat. I've used the brown, it'll just dirty up that helmet nicely. So a good tip that I learned a long time ago was if you want to make something look like it's weathered or aged, always paint it up like it's brand new. So then when you add in all the weathering effects, you do it simultaneously across the entire item. So everything sort of looks consistent. You don't have brand new looking shiny horns and then a weathered helmet. You sort of think of it in the process that it would naturally occur, I guess. Now, I find when using metallic paint, especially model paints, always do thin layers. Two things can happen if you don't. If you put on too thick, it'll be cluggy and inconsistent, and other times it can possibly run and then run onto places you don't want it to go. So lots of thin layers is always best, especially with metallics. So even though I'm working quite fast with the silver, by the time I finish all those parts, I come back to the first where I started, and it's ready to do a second thin layer. Okay, now onto the fun part. Adding the weathering using the shoe polish. Now when I first saw this, I think it was Cosplay Chris, another YouTuber, does great stuff, great cosplay stuff, a lot of props, excellent to watch, very entertaining. He pulled out the shoe polish one day and I thought, wow, how did he come to think of using shoe polish? And I've never looked back. It's excellent, it's got great coverage, use either the black or the brown, depending on what you're working on. I take the sponge off the end there so it squirts out onto the palette, and you've got a nice little reservoir of polish there. And yeah, you get a little bit of water to it and it thins it out so it's not so intense. Sure, your stuff might smell a little bit like a shoe for a little while, but it does disappear, and it does give me the effect that I'm after for this particular piece. So yeah, I'm going to start putting in all the little cracks and crevices to start with to begin. And what we do is we wipe it away with a bit of a paper towel, a bit of a cloth, and it gets rid of all the excess and leaves the polish in all the gaps. And what it can do is it can add a little bit of dimension. It makes the raised parts stand out a little bit more, gives a bit more of a highlight. So yeah, play around with it. If you decide to do it yourself, you can pick this up from your supermarket. It's only a few bucks, and hey, if you don't use it on your helmet, you can always polish your shoes with it. So win-win. So I've pretty much covered the helmet once over, so what I want to do now is start to really build up that dirt and grime and all the creases. So also by this time the shoe polish has dried a little bit, so it does go on a little bit thicker and tends to stay on there a little bit darker. So you kind of got to wipe it away much faster, because it will stain the helmet and you'll have trouble rubbing it off. The other thing I'd probably say is don't be like me, wear some gloves. It's not terribly bad for your hands, this stuff, but I would advise whenever you're handling paints and you've got your hand on the piece that you're painting, wear gloves. My wife tells me to wear gloves all the time. I probably should, but for the sake of this video, we'll just keep on soldiering on, hey? Okay, so we're going to do a similar sort of technique with the horns that we did with the shoe polish. So this time we're going to use Citadel's Nuln Oil. So this is the Games Workshop range of paints. This is essentially a wash. It behaves exactly the same as what we've just done with the shoe polish, where it's very kind of watery, runs in all the gaps and crevices, and yeah, adds a little bit more dimension. So we'll just apply that to the silver horns. Such a small area, I'm happy to use this, and we'll just dab it away with a paper towel or a cloth and get the same effect of that sort of weathered, worn look. So ultimately, this is a pretty simple, basic technique which you can have a bit of fun with, and you can get some pretty cool results with something so easy to do. So as you can see, I got the effect I was looking for. You can see that shoe polish has settled in all the little grooves nicely. And yeah, I'm very, very happy with it. So one thing you may also notice is there's a couple of print lines along the helmet from when it was 3D printed. I could have spent more time putting this up to sort of make it a lot smoother, but I simply just didn't have the time. I've got a bit of a deadline being for my daughter's birthday party coming up, so not so much a rushed project, but just one with a bit of a time limit. Now, time for the final stage of this creation would be the visor. So I've just used a sheet of paper, cut it to shape to make sure it will cover all the gaps at the front of the helmet. And very important to cut it out to the shape you need the acrylic, because you only want to cut the acrylic once. You don't want to waste it through trial and error. That's what the paper's for. And essentially I'm going to coat the acrylic with a tint. So the tint I've just bought from Bunnings, it's just a standard window tint. And I bought the acrylic from an online art store called Zart, which is what we use for our homeschooling supplies. So the acrylic I bought is 0.5 millimeters thick. If you go too thick, it's going to be hard to see out of. If you go too thin, it's going to be too flimsy. So I found 0.5 is pretty good. So with the tint applied, I've just chucked it in, bit of hot glue from a hot glue gun, keep it in place, and she's all finished. And before anyone asks, I am wearing a paperclip bracelet. I think my youngest daughter thought I was getting a bit frustrated and wanted to cheer me up after doing the tint. So, well, cheers for hanging out, and comment, like, and subscribe if you wish, and we will cue the epic music.